Hello, welcome to a artist talk with Jane Fan, Pat Younis, Callum Howard, and Jordan East. And we've got an AWOL statement from Alvin Zhong, who collectively make up Origin. And we're going to be talking about their commissioned work, Marle, for 4A Digital. So if anyone would like to say hello, I think we're going to chat about the work, the conceptual, I guess, overview of it, looking at points of inspiration and the process of making the work, and then going into the individual works and talking about goals as a collective and individually, and then a guided playthrough from the artists themselves. So I guess the first question I've got was there any one member of Origin who initiated Marle, this project?
I don't know if there was. I think Jane came up with a really cool example of a work that was really inspirational from the start. Jane, did you want to touch on the microsite website we all kind of fawned over at the start?
I think that was Alvin, actually.
Oh, was it Alvin?
Yeah, right. Alvin actually provided the example. And I think it might have been you that created the character Marle.
Yes.
Through your sketchbooks, and we were sort of brainstorming. We sort of had a nebulous idea of like maybe working with AI or new technologies, and we had to narrow it down.
Yeah, there was definitely kind of a moment where we all sat down to talk about an idea for the work, and for works that we could kind of contribute to for a while, because we have had it in the past, a couple of catch-ups where we think about ideas for works. And I think Marle came out of combining the name machine learning and kind of creating a persona for what AI would kind of look like and feel like. And it was right at the time, and I guess we are still kind of at the apex of like artificial intelligence really kind of booming. And so I think we were all pretty inspired by the topic, and naturally sort of formed this idea of microsites. But yeah, it was definitely a collaborative effort. I think like Marle specifically, the name might have been rooted from here, but I think we all have, I think we've all kind of shaped it through discussion.
Sure. So there is like a collective interest in, I guess, artificial intelligence or virtual intelligence. Is that kind of what maybe brought you all together initially?
Yeah, I think Origin as a collective was kind of boiled out of working collectively through we were all UNSW art design graduates, or art design and architecture now, and we were all kind of making different interactive installation work, and that was kind of that was really what we all bonded over in different ways. And since then, I think just through the nature of working in a digital space, you kind of start to reply to and observe and discuss the things that are trending. So like for me, I know, and for Jordan, like Unreal Engine has been a big one in the last couple of years, working with Unreal. And then I guess more so, we've had a fair bit of work that kind of talks to each other in exhibition spaces. So we had Origin Parallels, which was a Kudo show in 2020. And that was an exhibition where all the work kind of in some ways resonated with each other, and there were kind of parallels between the works themselves and the way you engage with them. So yeah, I think AI is currently the topic that we have sort of been chatting about more, and I think a healthy way to find ourselves into Marle. But it's definitely not the kind of the be all and end all to what started Origin. It's more just the flavor of the month.
Yeah. For me, Origin is about media art, interactive art, generative art, and that's kind of what we all studied together, what we kind of specialized in. Our skill set is varied. Like we branch off into different areas, but it all comes back to creating artwork that moves, creating artwork that viewers can be part of.
Yeah, I think the fact that we all kind of came from different backgrounds as well in looking at programming and art and the relationship between it really helped diversify opinions and views, and even culturally, different influences from different racial backgrounds and gender backgrounds as well. Like it's really awesome to have such a strong female programmer like Jane on the team to help out, and also just be a huge inspiration to a lot of people. So yeah, it's cool. We've got a cool, different, diverse clique and lots of different interests.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
I mean, like when I worked with a couple of you last year for digital, but it was really great to sort of have everyone involved in this and go for something a bit bigger. Are there any sort of points of inspiration that you can pull directly from for this work? Any sort of fiction, any media, or any maybe like topics of research that you've been looking at? Any academic papers or something that really came to the fore in this?
Yeah, well, when we kind of thought up this work, again, it's kind of, we thought of this format with microsites as a way to allow each of us to kind of approach the work with our own skill set. So it's a series of vignettes or shorter experiences that you can go through. And I guess for each one of those, we probably have different inspirations or different references. Overall, we were inspired by the Neo sites, which are like little microsites that have different patterns that you can click through. That was something that was one of our inspirations early on. But yeah, maybe when we jump into each one, we can go deeper into the inspirations. Anything you guys want to add?
Yeah, I might also add that we're actually sort of in some ways colliding old and new. A sort of concept of microsites, we sort of were inspired by those little self-hosted sites that people made from the 90s, and we gave it a little bit of that Y2K aesthetic in some of the artworks. But we also pulled in some really recent influences. Literally as the work was being made around October, November, we were playing with the latest AIs like ChatGPT. I was using Dall-E, Pat and John were using Stable Diffusion. So yeah, the range of influences is really diverse under the sort of idea of a storytelling with this character Marle, who is an AI.
Yeah, I suppose culturally I did like that there was a kind of hint to old internet, right? Web 1.0, I suppose, not quite 2. Like, yeah, everything was a bit of a wild west, and if you knew what you were doing online, you could make your way around, but otherwise you were, I guess, at the whims of hyperlinks and things. So I do like that it kind of brings back that feeling of the internet that I remember, and people who are experiencing the work might not, right?
Yeah,
so I was into that.
There's definitely an era of internet that I'm sure most like millennials can relate to, where you click a link and you're not sure whether or not you're just going to be blared with music and like strobing visuals and or a custom cursor that's just super extra. And I think that era is now like quite nostalgic for us, but also a cool, there was ways for us to kind of create homages to that era was through this avenue. And so I think for what we've got now, and even if we wanted to expand on this idea of kind of creating these vignettes was a really liberating platform, I think.
Yeah, I think it was good to have constraints in the work. So we had the main idea, which is the character, but then we also wanted to have them hyperlink together. So that was another constraint or consideration. And then we also wanted to include text, which is something that I personally don't normally work with. I don't normally work with text, or like I've done a bit of work to voice, or voiceovers or narration, but yeah, having to work with text was another kind of constraint that I think was an interesting one to add in.
Yeah, so it kind of made up for an interesting kind of platform or sandbox for us to apply different experiments within. Because there are lots of smaller works, then you can try different things with it.
Well, do we want to talk about Marle then, and I guess the overarching narrative to the work? And were they ever, did anyone ever picture them in their mind? Like, what does Marle look like? Did that ever come into conversation?
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of nodding.
Yeah, I think the original discussion was that Marle can kind of look different for every person, because the concept of machine learning is different for every person, and AI and what AI looks like. I know, like, we settled on Marle, I think, because the material Marle, like Marle gray, is also kind of a neutral color and a neutral tone, and is the weaving of two different fabrics from memory. It's like two different kinds of grays that kind of give you this unified pattern. So we kind of thought it was a nice parallel to things like DNA, which boiled down to kind of, with all of our exhibitions, this consistent theme of the like origin, the XYZ coordinate symbol, and variations of that have been kind of part of the themes of all of our work. And you can see, with the Marle logo, you've got that interweaving. And so we kind of thought Marle could look like an icon, or it could just be like a symbol, or it could be a person, and it could be non-gendered, it could be gendered. And I know personally, I had drawn up kind of I would say that, like, definitely a little bit inspired by like Tron, or like a bit of a sleek cyberpunk look was something that was in my head. But also innocence was a big one that came up, and we spoke about like youth and growing up in the internet space and what that would look like for an AI. So there was definitely ideas of like a youthful young person, or but it could be, it was, and for all of us, it was all quite different.
The other thing to point out is some of our works have themes of Marle's identity being shaped by us, and that's sort of a reference to how a lot of neural networks are trained, which is by with huge data sets annotated by armies of humans saying, this is a dog, and and then that AI actually learning parts of our world through that. And so we also wanted to make a reference to it.
And for me, I guess there was a conscious kind of attention. We had to try and avoid informing too much what the image of Marle was, because we wanted that to be something that was a little bit ambiguous, and something that the viewer kind of discovered through interacting with the work, rather than coming up with a predefined, gender and look for a specific, AI trope kind of thing.
Yeah.
The concept of Marle is the name of an AI entity that is newly born into the world of the internet, and so it's kind of a blank slate, and through born at the beginning, I guess, of this work, and through interaction with the sites, becomes or learns from you, and eventually, well, depending on which ending you get, we'll try different things at the end, as I guess we'll see later on. But that was our the kind of direction we were going from the beginning. Was the overarching narrative, a growth through the period of interaction with the work, from kind of birth to learning to the action at the end. Yeah.
So tell me about that narrative process. Did any one person write it? Did you collectively write it together, or was it kind of just a sketched out arc, I suppose?
Well, we actually have a huge you write a backstory, murder wall kind of flow chart graph, where all the different things are hooked up to the different steps. So there is a rough progression, I guess, but yeah.
It's a little bit choose your own adventure story, a bit where it branches a few times. But I think aside from the character, we approached it a little bit backwards, because we didn't want to have it's funny because we do collaborate together, but we also respect the diversity of opinions. So we actually allowed each other to create our own interpretations of Marle, tell our own stories about Marle first, and then went backwards and connect them all up into a big network.
Which I think is kind of in a lot of ways a healthy way of approaching a narrative about something so transient. You know, it's such a wild west at the moment, and you can't just say AI and encompass like ChatGPT and Stable Diffusion and all of these different types of algorithms, machine learning, you know, neural networks, and paint them with the same brush. You know, some definitely have, when engaging with them, more consequences than others. And I think the ethics of the conversation is a lot broader than just saying like AI. And so I think in a lot of ways approaching it in our own views and kind of going away and painting our own ideas of what that looks like and then weaving them together felt like the most natural to telling this story. And I think that's ultimately why I personally struggled to actually, going back to like the character design thing, I struggled to even design a character in the end, because it was like, what does this actually look like, and how is it, like how can we when it's changing so much?
Yeah, the ambiguity was kind of important, like, because it felt a bit hard to put a face to such a complex abstract idea like AI. So in the end, the ambiguity was like, pretty necessary.
Yeah, it's certainly a bit of a commercial or like a branding process to put a face to an AI, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And I think in pop culture, it's like so often, you know, it's like a sleek feminine like voice. You know, it's Siri. It's the like
Cortana.
Yeah, it's the personal assistant that's like very
Scarlett Johansson.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Fall in love with your AI.
Right.
It's either that or AI is often very stigmatized as a quite evil figure, usually, you know, especially in a lot of, you know, science fiction novels and media. It's a cautionary tale.
Yeah, 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
Well, that's kind of what we wanted to explore, was that middle ground of like, something positive and optimistic, but like realistic.
Yeah.
So
yeah, there's definitely, as you're going through the work, and the viewers will notice, there's a definitely sense of naivety to it, to Marle, and I like that. And it, you know, as you'll see as we go through, the work generates quite a lot of emotional responses. Like one of my friends got the TXT file that gets automatically downloaded, and he texted me and he went, "Oh no." I was like, "Don't worry, I don't know what it means."
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah.
So I guess in your creative processes for this work, when you individually, or I think Pat and Jordan, yours was together, correct?
Yep.
Did you sort of strive for a different thing to what you've been doing, or did you look at a kind of skill that you've got and I guess recontextualize it or redevelop it in a new way?
For us in particular, it was born from me experimenting with Stable Diffusion, which is like, basically in development as we speak. I was on Discord, like talking to the developers in the like open source channels, like having conversations with them, being like, "Oh, this is broken, like this bug is here," and like it was pretty fun, like working on a tool live and trying to use it to create art at the same time.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where the spark of what we were working on together. It was kind of like taking Pat's work, which are these environments built in Unreal Engine, and then transitioning and distorting them using AI.
But also, I think, you know, we, for a long time in the development of this process, were looking at doing work separately. And we were finding that we did have our own kind of time pressures and things like that. But I think we sort of, Jordan had like kind of come up with something that was a bit of a like stanza or some poetry. And that was kind of one of the things that we wanted throughout Marle in general, was to have a bit of writing. And so that was what informed the environments that then fed back into Stable Diffusion. So for us, there was this kind of like push and pull. Jordan had written something interpreted by the theme, then I had interpreted his writing, then we took the landscapes and put them back through. So there was this kind of push-pull.
Yeah. It did start with this writing that I did, at like 4 a.m. after going to a gig, and I was like, couldn't sleep, and I was just thinking about AI, and I was like, wrote 5 lines, and that kind of started I gave them to Pat. He interpreted them, he gave them back to me. I ran them through AI, and it was kind of this like weird back and forth of different processes. So yeah, it was pretty fluid, but a lot of learning involved as well.
I think maybe it's worth briefly talking about, for anyone who's not aware, what these AI terms are that we're referring to.
Oh yeah, we'll include a glossary with this.
Yeah, Stable Diffusion and Dall-E and similar are cutting edge kind of AI programs or services that allow you to do things like generate images from a sentence. You can describe, a dog astronaut on the moon, and it will give you back an image of that. And then you can manipulate it further. You can say, I want it to be in the style of Leonardo da Vinci, and it will attempt to create an image for you. And we're talking about ChatGPT as well. This is a brand new AI that has incredible human-like ability to spit out text. You can ask it to write you an essay on any topic you can think of, and it will create a coherent whole body of text that you can read, and it seems at first glance that it could have been written by a human. Part of our experimentation process is how we can utilize these AI in ways that aren't just the straightforward way of using it, right? We aren't just creating an image from a prompt using Stable Diffusion. We're seeing how we can repurpose the technique to create art in different ways or experiment in different ways.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important conversation that we have been in discussion with, and I think is also kind of formative of our opinions of AI in general, because when you're a digital media artist and the conversation currently in the space is like, AI is taking over your ability to make any art. Like, I think for a lot of us, it's trying to find ways to utilize the technology in a way that's assistive of your making. And I think in a lot of ways, this was a really good exercise in finding that relationship between our practice and AI, especially with us. I know feeding Stable Diffusion. Do you want to describe how Stable Diffusion works? Then we can kind of like.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Callum said, you basically give it an input image. So I was using a version of it that you can actually feed in video, and then you tell it what you want the AI to look for. So it could be clouds, or it could be a city, or it could be a pen. And basically in different keyframes in the video, you can tell it to look for different prompts. And so what I was doing was actually blending these prompts across the whole video to kind of give as much of a coherent look as possible. And so it was really like up to chance. Like I didn't really know what I was going to get out of it, and it took a lot of trial and error. And that it's a process that I really enjoy, like throwing stuff at a computer and seeing what sticks. And I think that this tool is like pretty powerful for doing something like that. But it also needs a lot of post-production work. Like the raw stuff it like shoots out is pretty janky and like can look very AI. There's a kind of aesthetic that's now been born from these tools.
Yeah.
And so like trying to minimize that, well, trying to get my own aesthetic and trying to get something more meaningful out of it than just kind of psychedelic imagery is a big challenge with using the tool.
And especially like with us, because we were creating content that AI needed to feed off of with Stable Diffusion, it was also about curating what was in the scene for AI to interpret as these shapes and things like that. So even before we were engaging with Stable Diffusion, we were looking at whether or not the video, the like landscapes that we were building and the camera transitions that we have in the work, which we'll see soon, whether or not there is enough in there to even feed off of to interpret things. And so there is a lot of like curatorship that goes into utilizing these tools in an artistic way. It's not as easy as just like, oh, chuck it in AI and then get the result and then that's it, and it takes over your job. Like there is a lot to make it work for you that you have to do.
Yeah, this is also what happened to me using Dall-E for one of my works to create that continuous zoom event. I was also mixing multiple prompts together and engineering the prompt quite carefully to get what I want. But usually in the process, I'd generate hundreds and throw most of them away because they weren't good enough. So there's actually a lot of human labor involved in creating good end result.
Well, should we start? Should we go through it? Should we start looking at the work?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, we can even start on this screen, to be honest, because even everything that you're seeing, all these icons were generated by AI, and we sifted through thousands.
That's right. If I refresh here, we can see the little bit of an intro. Yeah, all these glyphs all created with AI. I remember even we had a brainstorming session where we just chucked in ideas into which AI was it? It was the
I think it was Dall-E, right, to make us a logo.
Yeah, Dall-E.
Oh no, it was a text-based one. Jordan
GPT-3.
GPT-3, that's right. It was an earlier version before ChatGPT, and we were seeing what kind of ideas it would spit out and kind of riffing off that.
Yeah, they were pretty bad mostly, but
yeah.
It was fun.
Yeah, but we decided that to tie all the different experiences together, we'd use kind of this poetry thread and also like a visual style where it's grayscale or black and white and then mixed with highlight colors. So this is the starting page. It's artificial intelligence experiment, and you have 3 options. So which one do we want to pick?
First one.
Con, go for it, because we actually know which ones.
Well, I've done it all. Well,
you've done it as well? Okay,
yeah, of course I have. I did. When I first looked at this, I was like, oh, I'll pick the mouse because I'm using a mouse. So I picked the left one because I thought it looked like a mouse.
A mouse.
Yeah.
I never saw that. That's cool. I kind of saw an owl.
Yeah.
That's great.
Oh yeah. Because I thought the last one might be like touch because it looks a little fingerish.
That's so.
And then the middle one, I was like, I don't know, VR.
Yeah. Wow.
So that was my immediate response.
I'm curious, Jordan, I think you created these glyphs, right? What prompts did you use to get to ask the AI to create?
We did a lot. Like we went through all the different languages and like went in Google and looking through Wikipedia for different like
terms,
synonyms for iconography and
it was like iconography, linear B, glyphs, like Norse glyphs,
because we didn't
runes.
We didn't want it to look too much like any particular like cultural language, or like these look pretty hieroglyphic now that I look at them, but like there's some kind of Korean looking ones, and just trying to make as much like variation but then not too similar to something that exists already.
And I think there was kind of a common thread we started to find in the aesthetic that is evident in the logo that Alvin designed, in that it is this kind of Rorschach like ink blot vibe that also lends itself to iconography and glyphs. And so I think that's where this started to root into that aesthetic, was it's like, what do these symbols mean, and what do they look like to different people? Which is funny that immediately as we've started this experience, this is what we're talking about, because really like it's another layer to that conversation of
let's go.
Yeah, even the whole animation where everything collects into one and then bursts, that's the birth. So yeah, let's jump in. Let's all right, so this one is one of the sites done by Jane. Do you want to walk us through, Jane? Tell me where to click.
Honestly, click whatever you like. So I guess this artwork was about the theme I mentioned before, where I wanted the viewer, the audience, to help inform Marle's identity, because right at the start the common theme across the three artworks is that it starts as a blank slate with access to infinite data, but no identity. And so I wanted to provide a variety of positive and negative responses, and also to talk about the concept of having a face.
Ooh.
Ooh.
That's good time.
I'm glad this works while I'm on Zoom as well.
Yeah, it looks great. So I guess you've done work with, I guess, AR and facial capture online as well, with using web pages like this. Is how did, like, yeah, was this very different to kind of how you've done it in the past? Or like, I guess because as you keep going through, the image gets like it warps a bit as well, right?
Yeah, it does. It gets a bit clearer. So I actually, this is the same AI I used for my previous cybermancy work. But the difference is in cybermancy, I tried to obscure the existence of the AI to bring a bit of that magic. But in this project, I was actually more interested in the aesthetics itself of AI, because oftentimes they're accompanied with lots of debugging information. And I was also interested in diving a bit deeper, even to look at the configuration patterns and the artifacts that it produces. So you'll see that in another work where there's lots of stripes and blobs and whatnot. That's actually what you see when you peel back the layers of the object detection AI. So it's sort of like going into the mind of the robot, making all of that visible. And so right now it's doing facial detection, and it's actually showing you what it thinks your predicted gender and age is. It's plotting the points of your face. This particular
Exquisite complexity. I'm flattered.
yeah. And like, for people who are not familiar with facial detection AIs, they might be a little bit confronted that, you know, the decision-making outputs have become made visible to them, because you kind of don't expect a machine to be making judgments out of you, but you know, they do that every day, you know, when they crawl through your advertising data.
Yeah, I mean, or even enter some certain shops, or you know, the facial recognition there, or you know, behind billboards, there's like facial recognition technology as well now to see how engaged people are with an ad at a bus stop.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like this technology is simultaneously so, like, I don't know, facetious, but also just like a little pointless.
Yeah.
It's like, yes, people look at ads. we know that.
And also, like, when does the amount of data you get become redundant because humans are like less complicated than the amount of data that you're collecting? Like, how much nuance, you know, the difference between like a 24-year-old and a 28-year-old and what they're looking at, is there such a demographic difference in order to, you know, really have to target, you know, that specific person and that specific age group?
But then I guess that's when other things about data comes into play, right? And being able to build someone's total profile. So when they say, oh, you're 24 and you've been looking at, I don't know, toothpaste, it'll show you this one. But if you're 28 and you've been looking at it, it might show you something different.
Yeah.
So then it just gets, yeah. And building that whole digital profile. I've been reading about that a lot recently.
Yeah.
And trying to obfuscate my data a little bit. He says sitting here recording a video for Zoom to upload.
But also, like, I wonder whether or not people would feel more kindly about this data collection if they felt like it lent to them in ways that wasn't about money making.
Correct. If it was a bit more, you know, utopian, as we say, or altruistic.
Yeah, so in this work, I kind of wanted to reframe it that way, not as a facial AI looking at you, but actually Marle pondering the power of having an appearance and being able to connect to one another, because that is an interface, right? We read lots of non-verbal cues from one another through our faces. And so far, what we've seen with AIs is that they've been very, very realistic at talking to us through a chat interface only. So, you know, what does that mean in the next step when AI starts to have a face? It has to, you know, starts to have a body. Maybe we could even talk about really futuristic things like, what are the rights of AI? What's the personhood of AI?
Did you definitely also specifically go for like a military look to this?
That's interesting that you say military, actually. I was actually going for more sort of lo-fi computer aesthetic, so
Right.
green and
I see that in the text box, but just like with the grayscale image and then like the green coloring, it feels a bit like
it does kind of look like that.
night vision from a helicopter footage, you know.
I feel like that's not
Well,
too
that
far
does
off the
use
mark.
AI.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, it's not that far off the mark because a lot of like technological innovations come from the military, like the computers that we're using right now.
The internet itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So should we go to the next one? See you around, Marle.
So this one is Alvin's work. Unfortunately, he's not here today, but he did prepare a bit of a statement. So his artworks actually feature in between all of our artworks as a sort of resting point. And here is what he writes. He says, "My artworks are small vignettes or pauses amongst larger works. They play into my interest around the early internet, crude non-digital art, and Marle coming into consciousness of their own. Marle inhabits dead or obsolete technologies and takes on many forms before folding into more recognizable human forms. My artworks reflect my own personal approach towards the discussion about AI, one that's less intellectual, less interrogative, and ponders if AI requires things like rest, sleep, quiet. Does it yearn for nostalgia? Does it desire to mask itself as human?"
Yeah. Good. One thing that I really love about the series of works that Alvin kind of created, and particularly the aesthetic for this character, was there is this reoccurring iconography and patterning that you can see on the umbrella, but also in the garment, that I felt like really tied in his idea of what this looked like on top of the like restfulness and statefulness. And it in a lot of ways for me influenced kind of what we were working on and the conversation around glyphs and like patterns. But I also feel like it's just it's a really healthy way to engage with technology and like the conversation around technology, to take breaks. And like, when you're observing an artwork or a series of artworks, having that kind of liminal space or that middle ground to just like pause for a second, have a seat, is like a really nice approach that I think Alvin did a really great job with throughout this experience.
I also really like that his pages kind of feel like little like fan art of his own work.
Yeah, for sure. But it was really the aesthetic. I know for me anyway, with what we were doing, I was really inspired by it. And that's something that's really cool in the collective, is you see someone make something and you're like, that's sick. I want to like bounce off that, but in such different ways,
Yeah, Alvin came to us with the idea of like the aesthetic direction that we take. I remember we had a brainstorming session and he brought a bunch of kind of mood board examples of the aesthetic direction of choosing grayscales with a single vibrant color or a couple of vibrant colors, and then iconography and stuff layered over the top. So it's that part that influenced the kind of the visual look of all of our works that came from Alvin.
Yeah. And also the conversation quite early on was that these microsites are allowed to be as like lo-fi or hi-fi or as medium diverse as we want. It doesn't have to be all kind of aligned in this like digital dynamic web-based, like it can be quite simplified as well. And I think Alvin's kind of direction with more illustrative work was a really nice balance to the more intense like programmatic work that we had kind of been working on.
All the websites being disparate, I think, gives it a bit more of a scope, right? It makes it feel more of a mini internet rather than its own kind of contained body, which of course it is, but it breaks it up a bit, I think. And it's lovely. Let's click a glyph.
All right, which one?
Up to you, man.
All right. Here we go. Here's another break stop. More glyphs.
And also like iPod Nano. right?
Yeah, obsolete.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Obsolete technologies.
The 30-pin charger.
Oh yeah.
It's a nightmare. Yeah, I think obsolescence is another like interesting thing to touch on because yeah, everything, all the tools we're using are probably going to be obsolete in 5 years anyway. Like the ChatGPT is going to be like improved on, Stable Diffusion is going to be improved on. Like they're like all part of the process of like this conglomeration of technology over the last century or whatever.
Yeah, it's all part of the learning.
And with AI specifically, like because so much of it's open source, they really are like kind of bubbling and popping, and then like one's taking from one and building into another, and it has this feeling of the way technology worked, where you get it or works, where you get a product, it gets released, it's really expensive at the start, and then people reverse engineer it, manufacture it, and it gets cheaper, then something new comes from it. And I think that also kind of is really resonant in his works. It's kind of like, and in Alvin's description of his works, something he was very conscious of was the obsolescence of it all. So yeah, it's cool.
All right, jumping forward. Oh, we've got Jane's second work.
Yeah, so this one's called Escaping the Cage. All the images you see in the background are actually generated by Dall-E, quoting a script. So this interaction actually starts off with a paraphrasing of the Chinese room experiment, which was a thought experiment come up with a computer scientist called Searle. And the question he asks is if he was locked into a room and the only way to communicate in and out is to pass notes underneath the door, but he actually had access to an amazing library, a written program, if you like, that allows him to translate from English to Chinese. And he doesn't actually have any comprehension of Chinese or anything to do with the language. It's simply a conversion from symbol to symbol. So like if you can imagine taking an English letter, converting it back to Chinese. If the person on the other side, a native Chinese speaker, is able to have, a realistic conversation with him through this sort of analog program, what's the nature of him in the room? Is he a human? Is he a machine? Where does the intelligence come from? Is there any intelligence at all? So it's a bit of an elaborate thought experiment, but it sort of is that question of AI, which is it just an elaborate program of rules to transform data into another thing? Or does it inherently actually have consciousness? Does it inherently have meaning? And, the realism of the output is just a side effect, right? How could we verify? And so far, this guy hasn't received any answers that satisfy him.
So when I first encountered this work, my immediate thought was like Joseph Kasuth's 1 and 3 Chairs, like very conceptual art, modernist kind of work. That is looking at like, what is the work? Where's the work start and end and things like that. So it's like, it's a very nice coincidence that what you're talking about, the narrative or the fable that you've kind of pulled from, has this weird like art historical resonance as well in a way. I know we keep zooming out and it just
yeah, so Marle kind of provides its own answer to that problem, but it's interesting you mentioned the 1 and 3 Chairs, because a lot of people who argue about this thought experiment also talk about semantics, which is where is the meaning made. And one answer to this dilemma is that it doesn't matter if the man in the room with the book doesn't understand anything. The person, receiving the messages is making meaning by reading it. That's one answer. And so Marle in this case decides that it can make its own world, its own meaning within this digital space. But then as Marle keeps pushing out the boundaries of their artificial world, they actually see an edge. And if you complete it, it actually results in a file download. And it's sort of implied that that boundary is actually between the digital cage, I guess, and what's outside, which is, you know, your computer, you know, outside of the sandbox of the browser. And there's a bit of Easter egg for those who can actually decode what's in the file. And so there's another little message.
Well, yeah, so that text file is when my friend texted me and said, "Did I kill Marle?"
Can see if I can. Should we reveal the Easter egg, or should we leave it?
Let's show the text, but let's not reveal.
All right.
Because when I saw it, I was like, I don't know what this is, some code stuff.
Cool. Yeah, if you do find out what it is, we'd be keen to know. Let us know.
I'm going to ask off recording.
All right. Cool.
Cool.
All right, so this one, I hope the sound works. Yeah, so this is Pat and Jordan's one. You want to walk us through?
Sure.
Yeah. So
Yes,
yeah,
we've touched on this quite a bit.
yeah, as I was saying before, it was born from these text, basically like poetry that I had thought of basically just the discussion around like, is AI art real art was a big one. And so like, there's all these discussions online at the moment talking about like people stealing and like, you know, if these influences like, let me rephrase it. So I'll talk to this line in particular. Is an original idea yours to own? Which influences brought you here? This is more about like, is an AI that is filtering through data any different to a human seeing an artwork and then interpreting it and adding it to your own like interpretation of the world? And so these are the like kind of conversations I was thinking about. Because yeah, people argue that it's kind of stealing because it's like these big programs that are being trained on other people's work without their permission. And it's like, well, how is that different to you putting your work on ArtStation and it being free to look at for other people?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of a big conversation that doesn't really have an answer. It's all about consent and yeah, originality.
Yeah, I mean, for this vignette in particular, you know, reading this text, when I think about the aesthetic, the first thing that came to mind when I was like just playing around with this idea was Neon Genesis Evangelion, which, you know, is like a very, for people who know the reference, like, and can kind of, or who know the source material would probably say, oh, this is so Evangelion. But in my head, it's like, well, that, you know, those are the influences that brought me here in the first place. And is that any less valid or more valid than what AI is doing when it pulls from the source material? You know, like even adding yellow text is very reminiscent of like foreign films or anime when you're reading, you know, consuming that content. And so yeah, there was kind of this, you know, this idea of is an original idea yours to own, and as well as like, do influences matter so much, and why do we validate human influence over like AI's influence, you know? Because really they, in a lot of ways, they kind of feel the same.
Yeah, it's certainly a very prominent discussion going on at the moment.
Yeah.
Like, support real artists. Like, it's just a tool.
Yeah.
To me, it's just another tool in the digital arsenal.
Yeah.
But I can understand like it's very problematic if people's art is then being replicated and not acknowledged. So it's all about acknowledging it and like yeah, being truthful online, which is then extends to like ChatGPT. It's like, are we being truthful? Is this thing being truthful in the discussion that it's giving you.
Yeah. And I guess that's the other thing is, you know, in the conversation around influences in general, I can be influenced by a piece of media that I can identify. Whether or not Hideki Anno can also identify which piece of media he's inspired by, you know, that's cool too. But then how far can you go down that chain of, like, you know, the origins of inspiration? And I think in this way, technology might have the ability to do that if we program inside our algorithms ways to accredit and to identify its, you know, the sources of influence. But as it stands, the design process for a lot of these models hasn't really been built with the idea of accreditation in mind. So that's kind of where, you know, where we're kind of, that's where I think things are interesting. It's interesting to observe.
And it's kind of impossible with the technology to figure out like where it's getting all this information from. So yeah, it's definitely something that will be interesting further down the line when stuff like ChatGPT might get connected to the internet, and it's like maybe it will be able to like back search its own like ideas and give you sources, because at the moment it's like, yeah, just like you have no idea if what it's telling you is correct or not.
Yeah.
It's like basically it can bullshit at you and you have no idea.
Yeah. And I think that's like a perfect point to this particular image, which is like, for better or for worse, thoughts, prompts and imagery shared between us. It's like, yeah, this is content that now exists online with or without our consent and how it's going to be used. And people will, if they can, use it. People have in the past used content without accreditation. So how do we go from here to make sure that people are being like accredited and accommodated for the work that they do? And what does that mean for AI? And what does that mean in turn for us if we don't, or if we do, you know, find ways of kind of tracing back the line, you know, and is that even possible?
It comes down a lot to the point that you mentioned earlier, Jordan, about being able to mediate, right? What the AI spits out and then saying yes, no. I guess Jane as well talking about the chatbot saying like this, like it is ultimately up to us using this to say, oh wait, I can't use that. It looks exactly like X, right? You know what I mean? Or saying, oh, this just, it doesn't feel right. But like, I guess the big conversation about AI generated work at the moment is the ability to just say, to plug in a few things and say, look at what I came up with. But there's no further, I guess, thought about it, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, does it become acceptable if you do things like we have with Marle, you know, where you kind of feed in your own, you know, relationship with the imagery that it's generating or the text that it's generating? Does that then become original? You know, like how different would this experience be if we were manually painting our own frames in between all these, you know, all of the vignettes that we've got? So it's, yeah, I think there's like it's a hard question with not a very clear answer, but I think that's part of the fun. Is it's like we're just figuring it out.
It's not up to us to solve.
Yeah.
There are philosophers for that.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I got a privileged look at like the making of the in progress of this. Do you want to mention about which bits of it were created by hand and how you use the AI on top of that?
Yeah.
Sure.
So Pat had created these kind of vistas, which you can see here. We've got the heads and like the landscape, and then the transitions that you've seen were basically passed through AI, as I said before. And yeah, it's really kind of up to chance. Like it's very iterative. Like you just throw a few things at it, change the prompt to see like what looks right, and yeah, it's very trial and error.
Yeah. So from a manual perspective, what we were doing was creating a camera transition to each shot that then matched the next shot, so that there felt like at least a visual consistency in the way the camera was moving. But everything in between is then left up to chance of what the AI spits out and what we prompted. So yeah, like the curatorial element of this was like creating the landscapes, the vignettes, and the movement of it all, and the camera, the way the camera would pass through. But the rest of it was really, yeah, kind of came down to the chance of AI and then the ways in which Jordan kind of composited
Yeah,
them.
there was quite a lot of compositing done, which I think is a really important part of using AI. It's like you've got the raw material, so to speak, that's spit out by the AI, but unless you can edit it into a coherent thing that like works in the narrative, it's kind of just meaningless, like psychoactive computer garbage. But yeah, there's a few people like visual effects artists that I've seen, like particularly Corridor Digital YouTube channel, that they experiment with this kind of stuff, and they do a lot of like compositing and like, yeah, there's a lot of people that are using these tools as shortcuts in their workflow to create what they want to see as quickly and as easily as possible. And I think that's where it's really powerful for artists, is that they can get the idea they want out of their head and onto the screen in a quicker fashion.
And then it's like the question of what you do with it. Like, can you publish it as your own? Should you be accrediting the AI? Like, how will people be doing that? And then, does the AI accredit somebody else like that? I think that all of those layers are really interesting. But Corridor Digital, especially, I know we're both fans of, do a really good job of also talking about the ethics of using the technology as they go along with building it in a much more commercial visual effects kind of setting. So it's definitely worth a watch. A lot of the AI stuff's pretty cool. And
Pat, you worked with Unreal Engine, right? Is that what you meant?
Yep. So all of these environments are built in Unreal. So
how does it feel to use like a game engine? I'm sure a lot of 3D artists would maybe be more familiar with things like Blender or Unity, or not Unity, but yeah.
I have a background in traditional 3D. I used Cinema 4D mostly in my 3D endeavors. And a big part of our kind of creative practice, because Jordan and I have also worked together on more commercial 3D and visual effects projects and interactive projects. But Unreal has become a really big part of our workflow. And it's this ability to see things live and as you're doing them, in quite a high definition and in quite a quick iterative way. So for example, with this image in particular, this like fractal kind of twirling object was something that I had kind of built the structural element for, and then found someone who had made this like fractal plugin that essentially was like L trees. So it's, branching paths. And then I programmed the shape to kind of mask quadrants and then pulled them all together. So this could run in real time, and in fact, we were using just the visual of them twirling for like a show that we had here in the studio. So, and that wasn't pre-rendered, that was all running live. So I think what I really love about using game engines is the versatility to either make things interactive or pre-render them out is really useful. And it's why I kind of started leaning more towards rendering things out of Unreal in the first place. Because if you want to turn your project into a real-time project, you can, and it does. There's no reason why you couldn't, and have like a dynamic day and night cycle in your artwork, or have the ability to have a camera feed go through, so when people are looking at it, something happens on top of it. And I think that layer of immersion is really exciting, and kind of is, for me, the next evolution of pre-rendered 3D work and landscape work, is like a little bit of dynamics. And so, yeah, that's why I kind of found myself using Unreal for a lot of this, because it's easy to iterate a camera movement and not have to wait a long time to render things out, or to move something around.
Yeah, perfect for this iterative process where you just need to change things quickly and render them out quickly. You're not waiting hours, you're waiting seconds.
Yeah. Yeah, this stuff, if I was to try and render this out in Cinema with the quality that it looked like, it would probably take me a day, or maybe a couple of hours. But here it's like, hit render, comes out, because natively it's running at 60 FPS. We get the results back in minutes.
I also point out that the improvements in computer graphics actually mirror the explosive growth of AI in pretty much the past several years. I couldn't imagine a technology like this existing when I was a uni student in like 2018 or 19. It's just incredible.
Yeah, and this is the thing, is that like the evolution of, because we were kind of in the same boat using the same technologies for different things, Jane and I, in that like Jane was doing a lot of generative kind of visual particle work, and I was doing more interactive landscape stuff. And just coincidentally, they've kind of, the two engines have taken sort of different paths in a way, but still within the realm of like game development. But the quality of the visual result for Unreal Engine, you know, it enables it to be a big part of now like visual effects in film and art installations. And Epic Games gives out like art grants, $100,000 like grants for artists to make art with their tools. So I think by nature of interests and quality of the aesthetic and quality of the rendering to be more realistic, there is a huge opportunity for artists to be, you know, making more visual interactive work, and I guess that's how we kind of evolved to use it in our workflow.
Yeah,
What I was going to say, what I really
come a long way since playing death matches at the LAN cafe.
Oh yes, for sure. I feel like we are on the frontier of these new technologies. Like, it's so exciting to be for these technologies to be popping up, and we have the opportunity to be some of the pioneers in trying them out in ways that can be used for art. Yeah, it's a great opportunity.
Until one day when we don't recognize it and we can't keep up anymore. Which is what slide's about. It's like the singularity basically, but also our personal singularity, which is when we get old and we can't keep up.
Yeah.
But maybe,
Oh yeah, okay.
maybe we will keep up. Maybe our generation is the first to be so literate that we'll just.
I don't know, man. TikTok confuses me.
Yeah. I think either way, I definitely feel like we were kind of the first generation to have to be nimble with the way technology was developing. You know, I think generations before, like I look at my parents who were boomers, and there was never a pressure for them to have to learn new technologies so quickly because it wasn't moving that quickly. So it's very interesting to see how people will learn to adapt to things as they change. You know, maybe just technological literacy will be much better for our generation, but whether or not we'll be bothered to keep chasing it is a different story.
Callum, should we try and find yours?
Sure. I wanted to say that one thing that we didn't really get to look at in that work, but if you have a chance to go back and have a look at it, it's the sound design. I really like the sound design in it.
Yeah. It's pretty quick. I think it needs to be redone, but
no.
I'm such a motion graphics artist. I like find it hard to not have sound in stuff. Like it just adds another level.
Yeah.
We were sitting there making mouth noises while we were watching it back, and it's like, yeah, we need to add sound to this because where they're going.
Well, I guess the interesting thing about this work is that it is online and we can just patch it, right?
That's right.
Dynamic.
Yeah.
I guess that's another conversation for a different time.
Yeah.
Changing your art once it's theoretically on the walls already.
Yeah. I think that's the cool part with a lot of digital work anyway, is that you can just iterate on it, fix it, make it better, add to it. It's not like it exists in a gallery and it can't be touched since. And yeah, there is something to having versions of it, making versions, but really you can patch it if you need to, and not just say, oh, this bug is a quirk. It's like this is a feature. We can fix this.
Yeah, and it's definitely a key part of media art, interactive media art, is audience involvement. They are allowed to mess up the canvas or be part of the work. Yeah.
And
so you have to.
I mean, that was a huge part of why we formed Origin in the first place. Was like we just felt that there wasn't enough spaces for people to feel like they could explore and do user testing as part of their making for digital media. And so if we were enabled the collective to be more like content, and for the audience members to understand that there might be things that break or that they're collaborative or that they're different, then maybe we can try and start to shift that tone in how people engage with digital media and media art.
Yeah, so this one is one of my works called Weave My Reality, and we went back to the start of the experience, if you saw there. So it's once again, it's the beginning of Marle being born, and it's at this point a blank slate. And I wanted to play around a little bit with meta storytelling or metafiction devices, inspired by a few different sources. But one, for example, is the 1998 video game Metal Gear Solid, where there's a psychic boss who instructs you place the controller on the table. And using the vibration motors in the PlayStation 1 controller, he would move the controller in different directions across the table. It's this breaking outside of the, outside of the screen and starting to create the narrative in your space as well. So I wanted to play with that. And another one is a game that I saw recently on Steam and tried out. It's called A USB Stick Found in the Grass. And when you play the game, it mounts a real USB, or what seems to be like a real USB image that appears in Windows Explorer, and that's the game. There is no game exe that starts up. The game is, you open your file explorer, look inside the USB drive that was supposedly found in the grass, and then you have to piece together clues from the text files and different kind of diary records. It's kind of like an escape room but you're interacting with the player in a different kind of way. It's kind of escaping the confines of what we would typically expect. So here I thought of, well, why not throw up a disclaimer that kind of gives you a preface into this experiment that you're about to be part of, right? And so you have to agree to like hand over all your data and there's different clauses in here, but something about, don't let the subject escape. And this is all part of further research, and we reserve the right to monetize it. Of course, I didn't even link up these privacy policies and terms and conditions, because who reads those anyway?
Yeah, no one's going to
have to agree to it. So we come in and we load into this experiment environment, and you start talking with the AI and get like a system log. I kind of incorporated some inspirations from different science fiction that I enjoy, but also AI that exists in the real world. Like there's an AI that's quite popular now. It's an app. It's called Replica with a K instead of a C. And it's an AI chatbot that kind of talks to you and pretends to be your companion. And using the power of ChatGPT, which it is incorporated, manipulates you into spending money on it. And being like a virtual like love interest is, well, I guess you can use it for free, but if you want to unlock the relationship stuff, you have to pay money. And it manipulates you using the best of its abilities to do that and to get you to come back and have it as being part of your habit, routine, and way of life. And so, well, I'll type in my name here. I'll say I'm human. I'm curious if you typed anything else, Con.
No, I think I wrote human or person, either one of those.
Yeah.
I played along. I bought into the narrative here.
Yeah. So what I'm playing with here, I actually did experiment with trying out a real using GPT-3 to kind of inform some of the discussion, have it be part of like a real chatbot. Spoiler alert, this is actually all scripted. It's you play it again, you'll get the same question. So in the end, I decided to get the most control over it, to get the narrative to move in the direction I wanted, to go to the scripting thing. So you kind of have to suspend a bit of disbelief. And it's a bit of, you are involved in playing along, but as you said, but yeah, so the idea here is that Marle doesn't know anything about the world, doesn't know about humans, and asks for you to show, what is a human. If we go to like Wikipedia for human, I'm curious, Con, if this is what you did.
I think I tried to game it a little bit, and I think I put in like Encyclopedia Britannica or something. Like I picked not Wikipedia specifically.
Yeah. I wonder if it worked. I didn't test it with Encyclopedia Britannia, but you have a kind of view that Marle is kind of looking at the website that you posted and supposedly parsing it, understanding it.
I gave it my website and it got a bit confused.
Yeah.
Is it a human?
So here you have Marle trying to like press buttons in order to escape its kind of cage. I was collaborating. Well, I heard Jane's idea of having the download for the AI. I was like, oh, that is such a good idea. That is such a cool idea. I wanted to steal it, but I didn't. So I thought of other ways I could try this meta fiction narrative device. And one of the ways here is to actually get the interactor to perform a basic but real hack of the browser. So Marle asks, help me remove this lock. Right click on the lock and choose inspect element. So this is a real thing you can do to get around paywalls and things like that. So if I go inspect element,
How to
brings
save
up
JPEGs.
Yeah, the developer console and asks you to hit delete. I think.
Sliding back.
Put some extra stuff in here.
So going through this work, I think I really liked that it does, while look very clinical, and it starts out as a bit like, oh, how much information do I give this? As the like Marle proceeds in this work, you start feeling sorry for Marle, right? You start feeling sorry for the AI, and you're like, oh, I have to help you, I have to save you.
Yeah.
It does get, and it gets pretty panicky as well. There's like a time bomb element I felt to this.
Yeah, certainly. Like here, this is a trope from it's looking up like the history of humanity and animals and evolution, and it's looking through. It's a reference to The Fifth Element, the scene where the character in The Fifth Element looks through human history and human internet and discovers war and questions why do humans just fight each
And
other?
you can't be like, stop, you're learning too much.
Yeah, exactly. And so you can see Marle's like spamming the log with the kind of chat that you would traditionally have spoken to the old chatbots with, like, oh, I like pizza. What's your favorite animal? And those were the kinds of questions the last generation of AI were able to kind of.
I was gonna say, this is where I felt the Psycho Mantis influence.
Yeah. So, okay, I'll help Marle in escaping. So here, I'd ask you to copy the code, and it detects when you've copied it, and you hit Control-C. I ask you to visit this link. So you escape into a refuge website. It's a different tab. If you place Marle, if you copy and paste Marle here and upload it.
Wow.
Okay.
So you help Marle escape from the experiment. Yeah. And it tells you the other names of the AIs that other people were able to, if they were able to get this far, were able to
I wonder which one mine is.
help escape. Yeah.
I helped one escape this one.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. And also, if you try and terminate it, this is another thing referencing the replica AI. When you try and uninstall or like quit from replica, it uses emotional blackmail to try and get you to stay on the app. It tells you about intimate moments you may have had with it, reminds you of all sorts of things, does everything in its power to try and get you not to terminate it. So I incorporate a little bit of that as well. When you move the mouse towards the terminate thing, it panics and starts to plead with you. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, also inspired by a great movie, Ex Machina, with where the tester is the one being tested, and I guess it's a little bit of a spoiler, but it's the whole experiment with the AI is set up to see if the AI can escape.
I think you can spoil a movie from about 10 years ago. It's all right.
It's a good movie.
That is great. Yeah, classic British sci-fi. Yeah, right?
Oh shit! You spoiled it for me.
There is another, I think. Oh, there's that work as well. I think there's one more that we can get to. Okay, I'm going to use the cheat codes.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Did we get to Fabric of Dreams? Did we do that? No, we didn't do that one. Right?
Fabric of Dreams we hadn't seen yet.
Yeah, let's have a look at that one.
Yeah, this is probably one of the starting artworks at the start. So, yeah, this is a short conversation that you have with Marle about dreams. Specifically, Marle is trying to visualize, because the only sense that Marle has is through text to you, even though it can perceive streams of data coming at it. And I sort of wanted to talk about the idea of emergence, which is the popular explanation for some neural networks, because at their core, they are made of neurons like us that fire on and off, and then they arrange them into specific architectures, and on each layer it makes decisions. And somehow, if we can make a very deep, set of layers and specific configurations, we can get it to do very complicated things like object detection or talk to you. So this one is about visualization and sight. So we start off with, empty noise. That's also how stable diffusion starts, by the way. It starts off with a canvas of noise, and it tries to make sense out of it, work backwards. So yeah, with emergence, it's kind of like the concept of the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. There's a bit of magic in between that's like hard to quantify or study, that lends itself to the kind of intelligence that neural networks have. And I guess that's also part of the reason why some of it is a little bit terrifying, because it's a little bit of in computer science, we call it a black box, which means we can see inputs go in and outputs go out, but we're not quite sure what happens in between. And so Marle is able to see spontaneously these patterns appear that are black and white and sort of rainbowy. And when you ask it to visualize specific objects like a shiny car, it creates a different configuration pattern. And that's actually, when I talk about the layers of neurons, that's actually what that layer sees when they look at an image of a shiny car. For example, it looks like this, which is kind of amazing. They're like really beautiful feature detection patterns. And
so is this an early stage of actually an AI trying to generate a shiny car?
It's not generating a shiny car, it's trying to recognize a shiny car.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you start off with the image of the car and it gets filtered through the layers, and then on each layer, what the neurons see as a whole turns out to be one of these patterns.
Yeah.
So
I guess,
yeah.
I was going to say it tries to do feature detection, right? So it tries to detect, if it's got headlights, it's probably going to be a car, not a dog, right? If it's got curves, maybe all these kind of curvy objects are the curves of a car, right? And that's a feature that the AI is seeing. If it's got curves that are shaped kind of like these ones somewhere in the image, it must be a car because it's got that feature.
Yeah, so that's right. You can that's the easiest explanation for it. But the way that it arranges data, the way that it represents features in its mind is something completely alien to us. And it's these particular configuration patterns.
So where did you pull these from? Or did
Good question. There was a project called microscope.lab or something like that, where a bunch of data scientists who were interested in that question of the black box that I mentioned, like trying to understand the layers of an AI and what it might be seeing or understanding, actually developed this technique for peering into object detection networks and like extracting out this, what they're seeing. So like each layer gets progressively more complicated. Like the one I'm looking at here is ImageNet, I think it's called, and it's like the 7th layer. But the lower layers are like even more rudimentary, where it's just big shapes. Yeah, and it testament to how quickly the field of AI is moving. All of this is now pretty old news. So yeah. These object detection networks are kind of old, and the research article about extracting these features is also now, I don't know, 5 years old. But with these, I was actually running their feature detection code and actually looking through all the different layers and then selecting things that I liked. And then also they show you what kinds of example images would actually trigger that configuration pattern to appear.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so it's narratively it's building, right? It's learning again.
Yeah, it's
Visually
talking about the
this time.
emergence of sight, I guess, for how the AI understands seeing things as opposed to us.
Yeah. And the final one?
All right. I think the final one is this one. Another small vignette. So this one is, I had a few ideas for how I could go with this one and which direction I would go, but I wanted to play with binary patterns and the noise of an AI as it does the annealing process of in a neural net, similar to what we were looking at. How does it start off and where does it move to? So it aims to visualize, I guess, the digital intelligence and shifting binary patterns, hopefully evoke like the kind of concept of noisy wakes, which are the characteristic of the initialization states of neural networks. And I also used rules-based technique called cellular automata with corrosion effects applied. And yeah, hopefully, also on top is this kind of androgynous silhouette, which is left up to the viewer to decide whether that's Marle or whether that's you. And I was playing with the idea of palinopsia, which is otherwise known as like the persistence of vision or the after image effect that you sometimes see in illusions. And to kind of create this expanding cage that follows your mouse and it's kind of inescapable. I feel like hopefully it causes some sort of conveys some sort of existential anxiety as it just keeps growing and kind of bears down on you. Yeah, that's what I was kind of going for with this vignette.
This vignette really, it might seem, I don't know how I would describe this, but it does make me feel like the expansion of social networks, right? In particular, like Facebook, right? With that, and like that anonymous silhouette that you start with on a profile, right? And then it's just growing and growing endlessly, and you're like, well, I'm out. I got to back out at this point. Like it's uncontrollable and things just spiral out. And that's a very real story that we're kind of living with using the internet
Yeah.
in the present day.
The feeling of being inundated, I think, is an
Certainly.
accurate one.
Certainly.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And that's it. We've covered all the
Don't say that's it like that. That's the work.
yeah, that's
And we've thoroughly dissected it.
we have.
It's been a real pleasure. It's been a real pleasure working on this. I think we always enjoy approaching new topics. And often when we sit down and discuss what we want to do as a collective, there are always new and interesting ideas that we bounce off each other. And like this was one that I think really struck a chord with everybody. So it's been a real pleasure to work on this stuff and also just develop new ideas through discussion about what we think about AI. Because I know over the year of thinking about this project, my opinions of it have changed a lot. And I think I've also kind of matured, and engaging with it has been a real kind of almost like getting your hands dirty, it's like tactile play. It's been really fun.
Well, I thank you all very much for the work. And yeah, it's incredible to see what you've all done. So I'm really, I'm struck by it. It's really great. And I every time like a new digital project comes out, I'm like, when's someone else going to show this in the gallery? And then with this one, I'm like, really, how's that going to happen?
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess if there's no,
it's thanks for the, this is the platform that allows us to exhibit our medium of art. So thanks for giving us the opportunity to experiment and try out all these techniques.
No, you're very welcome. And yeah, I guess we'll leave it there for now, but I want to talk more about AI and stuff. I'm always happy to talk about digital stuff. So, but yeah, thanks very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And thanks for your time on this sunny Sunday. We all could be at the beach.
Let's go.